The chains bite into Illyra Voss's wrists as the guards drag her onto the wooden platform, and the crowd below roars like a living beast, hungry for a show. Torches burn along the edges of the square, throwing orange light across hundreds of faces, twisted with greed and curiosity. She does not cry. She does not beg. She lifts her chin and stares straight ahead, because 3 years of training taught her that fear is a door, and she will not open it for anyone in this filthy market. A traitor named Garrick shoves her forward, his fingers digging into her shoulder hard enough to bruise. He calls out prices to the crowd, listing her supposed skills as if she were a horse for sale. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Illyra counts the exits. 2 gates on the east wall, a narrow alley behind the auctioneer's stage, a guard tower with a single archer who keeps glancing at his watch instead of the crowd. She has learned to read a room the way other people read books, and this room tells her everything she needs to know about how she might escape it, if escape were still her plan. It is not. Not tonight. Tonight she has a different purpose, one buried so deep inside her that even her own heartbeat seems to know to stay calm. She was sent here, chosen, trained by people who lost everything the same night she did, in a village called Ashvale that no longer exists, except in memory, and in the scars some of its survivors still carry. She was 12 when the fires came. She remembers the smoke more than the screaming, though the screaming visits her, in dreams she no longer speaks about. The crowd shifts, and a new energy ripples through the square, spreading outward like water, disturbed by a stone. People are turning, bowing their heads. Illyra feels the air change before she understands why, the way animals sense a storm before the first cloud appears. Then she sees him. He is not what she expected. Chaol Draven walks through the parting crowd wearing no crown, no ceremonial armor, nothing to announce that he rules over more territory than any other alpha in the region. He wears a simple black coat, plain boots, and an expression that gives nothing away, and yet every single person in that square moves aside for him without being told to, the way trees bend without being asked when the wind arrives. He does not look like a monster. Illyra has spent years picturing his face in her mind, shaping it out of every story she was told about the massacre at Ashvale, about a king who ordered villages burned to secure his borders, about a man with no mercy and no conscience. She built him into a demon so she could hate him properly, so her hands would not shake when the moment finally came. But the man walking toward the auction platform looks tired. There are shadows under his eyes that speak of sleepless nights, and something in the way he studies the crowd makes her think he would rather be anywhere else. It does not matter. Whatever weariness lives behind his eyes changes nothing about what he has done, or what she has been sent to do. The auctioneer, a thin man with yellowed teeth, begins his usual performance the moment he sees the king approaching. He talks fast, listing exaggerated qualities, gesturing toward Illyra as though she is furniture rather than a person. She keeps her eyes forward, refusing to look at Chaol Draven directly, because she has learned that predators notice when prey watches them too closely. Yet she feels his gaze settle on her anyway, heavy and searching, and it takes everything in her not to flinch. Other nobles call out bids, some with cruel amusement in their voices, treating the entire event like a game meant to entertain them before dinner. Chaol says nothing for a long moment. He simply watches her, his head tilted slightly, as though trying to solve a puzzle no one else in the square can see. Then he speaks, and his voice is quieter than she expects, carrying easily across the noise without him needing to raise it at all. He names a price no one dares to challenge. The crowd falls into stunned silence, then breaks into whispers. Nobles who had been laughing moments earlier now watch the king with new interest, trying to guess what has caught his attention. Illyra keeps her breathing steady, though her pulse hammers beneath her ribs. This is the opening she needs. This is the door swinging open exactly the way her handlers said it might, if she played her part correctly. She had expected to be purchased by some minor lord, someone she could work around slowly, carefully, over months of patient planning. She had never expected the king himself to walk into the market and claim her, before anyone else had the chance to bid a second time. Garrick unlocks her chains with clumsy, hurried movements, eager to please the most powerful man in the kingdom. When her wrists are finally free, she resists the urge to rub the raw skin, forcing her hands to remain still at her sides. Weakness is a currency here, and she refuses to spend any of it in public. Chaol steps closer, and up close he is taller than she expected, broad-shouldered in a way that speaks of strength rather than display. His eyes, when they finally meet hers directly, are a shade of gray that reminds her of storm clouds gathering before a downpour. He studies her for a long moment, as if waiting for her to look away first. She does not. Something flickers across his face, gone before she can name it. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. He turns without another word, and begins walking toward a line of dark carriages waiting at the edge of the square, clearly expecting her to follow. A guard nudges her forward, and Alira falls into step a few paces behind the king, her mind already racing through the plan she has rehearsed 1,000 times in the quiet hours before dawn. Get inside the keep, learn its layout, learn his habits, his weaknesses, the moments when even a king forgets to guard himself. Wait for the right night, the right silence, the right opportunity, and finish what the fire at Ashvale started. She climbs into the carriage when instructed, taking a seat across from him in the cramped space, her spine straight despite the exhaustion pulling at every muscle in her body. Cale watches the passing streets through the window instead of looking at her, and for a while neither of them speaks. The silence stretches long enough that she almost believes he has forgotten she exists, until his voice breaks it, calm and unreadable. He asks her name. She hesitates only a heartbeat before answering, giving him the truth because a lie this early would be foolish, easily uncovered by anyone with resources like his. Alira, she tells him, nothing more. No family name, no history, nothing that might connect her to a village that burned to the ground under his command. He repeats her name once, quietly, as though testing how it sounds, then falls silent again. The carriage rattles over uneven stone streets, carrying them away from the market and toward the looming silhouette of the obsidian keep rising in the distance, its dark towers cutting sharp lines against the night sky. Alira watches it grow larger through the window, memorizing every detail she can, every gate, every guard post, every possible weakness in its ancient walls. This fortress has stood for generations, home to a bloodline of Alpha Kings who ruled through strength and fear. Somewhere inside those walls, she will find the answers her people have waited years to uncover, and eventually, the chance to end the reign that began with her family's destruction. She glances at Cale once more, studying his profile in the dim light. He looks less like a tyrant, and more like a man carrying a weight too heavy for one person to bear alone. It unsettles her more than she wants to admit. She reminds herself, silently and firmly, that monsters do not always look the way stories describe them. Sometimes they wear tired eyes and quiet voices. Sometimes they buy broken girls from auction blocks and offer them nothing more than silence in return. Whatever kindness might exist behind his expression changes nothing about her mission. She was not sent here to understand him. She was sent here to destroy him, and she intends to finish what she started, no matter how human he might appear beneath the crown he refuses to wear. The carriage passes through the outer gates of the keep, guards saluting as it rolls by, and Alira feels the walls of the fortress swallow her whole. Somewhere behind these stones, her future and his are about to collide in ways neither of them can yet imagine, and there is no turning back from the path she has chosen to walk. As the carriage comes to a stop within the inner courtyard, Cale finally turns to look at her again, his gray eyes steady and unreadable. He tells her, in a voice too calm for the weight of his words, that she now belongs to the keep, though not as a prisoner, and not quite as a guest. He does not explain further. He simply steps out into the cold night air and waits for her to follow, leaving her to wonder exactly what kind of life she has just been pulled into, and how long she can hide the truth of why she came. She steps down from the carriage, boots touching stone that generations of his family have walked before him, and for the first time since the fire took everything she loved, Alira Voss allows herself a single thought that has nothing to do with vengeance. She wonders if she will survive long enough to finish what she started. Then she pushes the thought away, straightens her shoulders, and follows the Alpha King into the fortress he calls home, carrying her secret purpose hidden beneath a mask of quiet obedience that she intends to wear for as long as it takes. Inside the keep, the air feels colder than the courtyard, as though the stone itself remembers centuries of secrets it refuses to share. Torches line the corridors, their flames flickering against tapestries, depicting battles Alira does not recognize, ancestors of the man walking silently ahead of her. She keeps pace, memorizing turns without appearing to study them, counting doors, noting which halls lead toward the outer walls, and which twist deeper into the heart of the fortress. A woman with sharp eyes and graying hair meets them near a wide staircase, her expression unreadable as she looks Alira over from head to toe. Kale introduces her simply as Marin, the keeper of the household, and instructs her to see that Alira is given a room, clean clothes, and whatever else she requires. He does not linger to explain more than that, turning down a separate corridor without another glance, leaving Alira alone with a stranger in a fortress full of them. Marin studies her for a long moment before speaking, her voice neither warm nor cruel, simply practical. She tells Alira that the king has never once brought anyone back from the market before, not in all the years she has served this household, and the words settle uneasily in Alira's chest. She had not considered that her purchase might draw attention, rather than allow her to disappear quietly into the background of keep life. She follows Marin up the staircase, and through a maze of corridors, until they reach a small room near the eastern wing, sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a wash basin, and a single window overlooking the training yards below. Marin leaves her with a change of clothes and instructions to rest, though sleep feels impossible with so many new details crowding her mind. Alira waits until the older woman's footsteps fade completely, before moving to the window, studying the yard below in the pale moonlight. Guards patrol in predictable patterns, their routes almost lazy in their consistency, which tells her something important about how secure this fortress truly believes itself to be. Confidence like that can become a weakness, if she is patient enough to wait for the right moment to exploit it. She does not sleep that night. Instead, she sits by the window for hours, watching shadows move across the courtyard, listening to the distant sounds of the keep settling into silence. Somewhere within these walls, the man who destroyed her village sleeps without fear of the danger now living under his own roof, and the thought brings her a strange, hollow kind of comfort. By morning, exhaustion finally pulls her into a shallow, restless sleep, filled with fragmented images of smoke and fire that she has long since stopped trying to escape. She wakes to the sound of knocking, sharp and impatient, and finds Marin waiting outside her door, with fresh clothing, and an explanation that the king has requested her presence in the main hall before the midday meal. Alira dresses quickly, choosing simple, practical clothing over anything that might draw unwanted attention, and follows Marin through corridors that feel slightly less unfamiliar than they did the night before. The main hall, when they reach it, is larger than she expected, with high ceilings and long windows that let pale morning light spill across polished stone floors. Kale sits near the head of a long table, speaking quietly with a broad-shouldered man whose posture radiates quiet authority. When Alira enters, both men fall silent, and the stranger turns to study her with open suspicion, his eyes narrowing slightly, as though trying to see straight through whatever mask she wears. Kale introduces him as Ronan, his second-in-command, a man he trusts with matters of security throughout the keep and beyond its walls. Ronan does not offer a greeting. He simply watches her, and Alira understands immediately that this man will be far more difficult to deceive than anyone else she has encountered so far. The midday meal passes in careful, measured conversation, most of it directed at matters of the kingdom rather than at Alira herself, though she notices Kale glancing toward her more often than necessary. She keeps her answers brief when questioned, offering just enough to seem cooperative, without revealing anything that might later be used against her. When the meal ends, Kale dismisses most of the room with a simple gesture, but asks Alira to remain behind, and Ronan lingers near the doorway, clearly reluctant to leave the two of them alone, despite his king's clear wish for privacy. Once the hall empties, Kale studies her in silence for a long moment before speaking, his tone quieter than before, almost hesitant, as though he is choosing his words with unusual care. He tells her that she is not expected to serve as a servant within these walls, nor is she a prisoner locked away for his amusement. He offers no explanation for why he purchased her, only that she will be given a place within the keep, freedom to move through certain areas, and protection from anyone who might wish her harm. Alira listens carefully, searching his face for the cruelty she has been told to expect, but finds only quiet exhaustion and something that looks almost like guilt, though she cannot yet understand its source. She thanks him with practiced humility, careful to keep her voice soft and grateful, though inside, Her mind continues cataloging every piece of information he offers, filing it away for later use. Before she leaves the hall, Kale adds one final thing, almost as an afterthought, telling her that she is free to explore the keep grounds during daylight hours, provided she remains within the outer walls and avoids the northern tower, which houses matters of state too sensitive for wandering eyes. The mention of the northern tower catches her attention immediately, though she keeps her expression carefully neutral, nodding, as though the restriction means nothing to her. Later, alone in her small room, she allows herself a moment to consider what might be hidden within that forbidden tower, and whether it might hold the answers her people have been searching for since the night Ashvale burned. Outside her window, the training yard fills with the sounds of soldiers beginning their daily drills, the clash of practice weapons echoing off stone walls. Alira watches for a while, studying formations, counting numbers, memorizing the rhythm of a fortress that believes itself untouchable. She thinks of her handlers waiting somewhere beyond these walls, trusting her to complete a mission years in the making. She thinks of the family she lost, of the promises made over their graves, of the fire that took everything and left her with nothing but purpose to carry forward. Whatever kindness Kale Draven shows her in these early days changes nothing about the debt he owes for what happened at Ashvale. She reminds herself of this firmly, repeating it like a quiet vow as she watches the sun rise fully over the keep, illuminating a fortress she now calls home, for reasons far more dangerous than anyone within its walls could possibly imagine. The days ahead will require patience, careful observation, and a mask strong enough to hide every truth she carries. She intends to wear that mask perfectly, for as long as it takes to finish what she came here to do. That evening, as the sky above the keep deepens into shades of violet and gray, Alira takes her first real walk through the outer courtyard, testing the boundaries of her new freedom. Guards watch her with cautious curiosity, none of them quite sure how to treat a woman who arrived in chains but now walks unescorted through the grounds their king calls home. She keeps her pace unhurried, her expression calm, though every step is calculated, every glance at the surrounding walls a piece of the map slowly forming in her mind. Near the edge of the training yard, she pauses to watch a group of young soldiers practicing hand-to-hand combat under the supervision of an older instructor with a weathered face and a voice like gravel. Their movements are disciplined but not flawless, and Alira finds herself noting weaknesses in their stances, almost without meaning to, old habits surfacing from years of training she was never meant to abandon. A young soldier named Corwin, barely older than Alira herself, notices her watching and breaks away from his group during a pause in the drills. He approaches with an easy, friendly smile that seems entirely out of place within these grim stone walls, introducing himself before she has the chance to retreat into polite distance. He asks if she knows anything about combat, teasing gently that she watches their forms the way his old instructor used to, with sharp, critical eyes. Alira offers a practiced laugh and a vague answer, deflecting his curiosity, while carefully filing away his name and his easy trust, aware that even small allies within these walls might prove useful later. Their conversation is interrupted by Ronan's arrival, his presence immediately shifting the mood of the yard, as soldiers straighten their posture, and Corwin steps back with visible unease. Ronan says nothing directly to Alira, but his eyes linger on her a moment too long, before he addresses Corwin about returning to his duties, his tone leaving no room for argument. As the young soldier hurries away, Ronan finally turns his attention fully toward Alira, studying her with the same guarded suspicion he showed during the midday meal. He does not accuse her of anything, not yet, but his silence carries a weight of its own, a clear warning that he intends to watch her every move within these walls. Alira meets his gaze without flinching, offering nothing but calm patience in return, though inside she recognizes immediately that Ronan will be the first true obstacle standing between her and the completion of her mission. Men like him do not trust easily, and trust broken too quickly is far more dangerous than trust never given at all. She excuses herself politely, retreating toward the quiet of her room as the last light fades from the sky, leaving the training yard behind, and carrying with her a growing list of names, faces, and details that will shape the careful, patient plan she must build in the days ahead. Alone once more within the narrow walls of her chamber, Alira allows herself a single, quiet breath of relief, the first true exhale since stepping onto that auction platform the night before. The path ahead remains uncertain, filled with dangers she cannot yet fully predict. But for now, she has survived the first step, secured a place within the very walls she was sent to bring down, and that alone is enough to carry her forward into whatever comes next. Outside her window, the keep settles into the deep quiet of night, unaware that within its ancient walls, a storm has already begun to gather, patient and silent, waiting only for the right moment to finally break. 3 days pass before Elira is summoned to her first formal banquet within the Obsidian Keep, and the invitation arrives not from Chaol himself, but from Merrin, who delivers it with a tone that makes clear refusal is not truly an option. Nobles from across the kingdom will gather that evening to mark the anniversary of a treaty signed generations ago, and the king's household is expected to attend in full, including, apparently, his newest and most curious acquisition. Elira dresses in a gown Merrin provides, deep green fabric that fits her almost too well, as though someone anticipated her measurements before she ever arrived. She studies herself briefly in the small mirror hanging on her chamber wall, barely recognizing the composed young woman staring back at her, so different from the chained figure dragged onto an auction platform only days before. The main hall, when she enters it that evening, has transformed entirely from the quiet space where she shared a midday meal with Chaol and Ronan. Long tables stretch beneath glittering chandeliers, filled with nobles in fine clothing, their laughter and conversation blending into a steady wall of noise that presses against her senses from every direction. She finds a seat near the edge of the gathering, close enough to observe but far enough to avoid unwanted attention, though she quickly realizes such hopes are foolish within a room full of people eager to gossip about the king's mysterious new guest. Whispers follow her from table to table, some curious, others openly cruel, speculating loudly about her origins and her purpose within these walls. A noblewoman named Sable, dressed in shimmering silver, approaches with a smile too sharp to be friendly, asking pointed questions about where Elira came from, and what exactly she offers a king who could have anyone he desired. Elira answers carefully, deflecting with practiced humility, though she can feel the woman's calculating gaze, searching for cracks in her story. Across the hall, Chaol sits at the head table, engaged in quiet conversation with several older nobles whose expressions suggest matters of importance rather than idle celebration. He glances toward Elira more than once throughout the evening, his expression unreadable, though each time their eyes meet briefly, something unspoken passes between them that she cannot quite name. The evening grows more difficult when a noble named Lord Cassian Vale approaches her table, his voice carrying loud enough for nearby guests to hear as he mocks her humble origins with cutting, careless words, clearly enjoying the discomfort his cruelty creates. Elira keeps her expression calm, refusing to give him the reaction he seeks, though the insult lands harder than she expects, stirring old memories of loss and humiliation she has spent years trying to bury. Before she can respond, Chaol rises from his seat at the head table, and the entire hall falls into sudden, uneasy silence. He crosses the room with unhurried steps, his presence alone enough to silence Lord Cassian's mocking smile completely. He does not raise his voice or issue any dramatic threat. He simply states, calmly and clearly, that anyone within his household deserves respect, and that further insults will not be tolerated within these walls. The hall remains silent for a long, uncomfortable moment, before conversation slowly resumes, quieter now, more cautious. Lord Cassian offers a stiff apology before retreating to another table, and Elira finds herself staring at Chaol with an expression she cannot fully control, surprise, and something far more dangerous mixing together beneath her carefully maintained composure. He does not linger to accept gratitude, returning instead to his seat at the head table as though nothing unusual has happened, though Elira notices Ronan watching the entire exchange with narrowed, thoughtful eyes from across the room. Later that night, alone in her chamber, Elira sits by her window and replays the moment over and over, trying to understand why a simple act of defense unsettles her so deeply. She was trained to see Chaol Draven as a monster wearing a crown, a man responsible for the destruction of everything she once loved. Monsters do not defend strangers from cruelty without expecting something in return. And yet, she can find no ulterior motive in what he did, no calculated political gain, no audience worth impressing beyond a room full of nobles he seemed entirely unconcerned with pleasing. He simply defended her, quietly and without hesitation, and the simplicity of the act troubles her far more than outright cruelty ever could. She reminds herself firmly that appearances mean nothing, that even the most dangerous men can perform small kindnesses when it suits them, and that she cannot allow a single moment of unexpected decency to shake the resolve she has carried for years. Ashvale burned because of decisions made within these very walls, and no quiet defense at a noble's banquet can undo that truth. Still, sleep does not come easily that night, her mind circling back again and again to the memory of Cale crossing that crowded hall, his voice calm but absolute, defending a woman he barely knew from cruelty she had already learned to endure alone. The following days bring a strange, uneasy rhythm to Alira's life within the keep. She spends her mornings exploring the grounds within her permitted boundaries, memorizing patrol schedules and guard rotations with careful, patient attention. Her afternoons often find her drawn into brief conversations with Cale, who seeks her out more frequently than she expects, asking questions about her thoughts on matters of the kingdom, testing her opinions with genuine curiosity rather than idle politeness. She approaches each conversation as another opportunity to gather information, yet finds herself, more than once, forgetting her careful calculations entirely, drawn into genuine debate about justice, leadership, and the burdens of power. Cale listens to her opinions with unusual attentiveness, occasionally challenging her perspective, occasionally admitting when her arguments shift his own thinking, and each exchange leaves her more unsettled than the last. Ronan's suspicion, meanwhile, only deepens with each passing day. He begins appearing unexpectedly during her walks through the grounds, offering brief, pointed questions about her past that she deflects with practiced ease, though she senses clearly that her answers satisfy him less each time. He watches her interactions with Cale from a careful distance, his expression unreadable but his attention unwavering. One afternoon, while exploring a quiet corridor near the eastern wing, Alira encounters Corwin again, the young soldier from her first evening in the courtyard. He greets her warmly, offering to show her a shortcut through the gardens that most newcomers never discover, and she accepts, grateful for a companion whose intentions seem refreshingly simple compared to the careful games she plays with everyone else. As they walk together, Corwin speaks freely about life within the keep, mentioning offhand that the king has seemed different lately, lighter somehow, though he cannot quite explain why. Alira listens carefully, filing away every detail, though something in his innocent observation settles uncomfortably in her chest, a reminder that her presence here has already begun changing things she never intended to change. That evening, standing once again at her window overlooking the training yard, Alira allows herself a rare moment of honest reflection. Her mission remains unchanged, her purpose as clear as the day she stepped onto that auction platform, and yet the fortress she was sent to destroy no longer feels quite as simple as it once did. She thinks of the fire that took her family, of the promises made over graves that never received proper burial, and she forces her resolve back into place, brick by brick, refusing to let quiet kindness and unexpected conversation weaken years of careful preparation. Whatever complications arise in the days ahead, she reminds herself firmly, the mission remains the same. Cale Draven must answer for what happened at Ashvale, no matter how human he might appear beneath the weight of his crown, and no matter how much harder that truth becomes to remember with each passing day inside these walls. A week after the banquet, Cale requests that Alira join him on an inspection of the northern farmlands bordering the keep's territory, explaining that the journey requires witnesses unconnected to the local nobility, people whose reports he can trust without political motive clouding their observations. Alira agrees before fully considering the implications, curious despite herself about a side of his rule she has not yet witnessed firsthand. They travel by horseback rather than carriage, accompanied by only a small guard escort, and the openness of the countryside feels strange after days spent confined within stone walls. Alira watches Cale carefully as they ride, noting how differently he behaves outside the formal boundaries of his court, more relaxed, more willing to speak plainly about the struggles facing the kingdom he inherited far too young. They stop at a small village where farmers greet the king with genuine warmth rather than fearful formality, children running alongside his horse without hesitation, elders approaching to discuss matters of crops and taxes with an ease that surprises Alira deeply. This is not the reception she expected for a tyrant responsible for burning villages to secure his borders. Kale listens patiently to each farmer's concerns, making notes, promising specific changes rather than empty reassurances, and Alira finds herself watching him with growing confusion, rather than the calculated observation she intended to maintain. Everything she witnesses contradicts the image she has carried for years, and the contradiction unsettles her more than any danger she anticipated facing within the keep. During a quiet moment as the sun begins to set over the farmlands, Kale dismounts near a small stream and invites Alira to do the same, explaining that they will make camp there before continuing their journey the following morning. As the guards set up a modest camp nearby, Kale sits beside the water, and Alira, after a moment of hesitation, joins him, curiosity finally overcoming her careful caution. He speaks quietly about the weight of ruling a kingdom built on decisions made long before he took the throne, mentioning briefly, almost carefully, that certain events from his father's reign continue to haunt him, though he offers no specific details that evening. Alira listens closely, searching for any hint of the truth behind Ashvale, though she says nothing, unwilling to reveal how much that particular history means to her. As darkness settles fully over the camp, Kale turns the conversation toward her instead, asking gently about her own past, her family, the life she lived before the auction block. Alira offers careful half-truths, enough detail to seem honest, without revealing anything that might expose her true purpose, though she notices, uncomfortably, how easily lies come to her when speaking with him, and how much that ease troubles her conscience. They return to the keep 2 days later, and something between them has shifted subtly during the journey, an unspoken understanding neither of them acknowledges directly, though both seem to sense its presence whenever their eyes happen to meet across a crowded room. Alira spends the following nights lying awake, questioning everything she thought she understood about her mission, about the man she was sent to destroy, and about the growing uncertainty now tangled around every careful plan she once held with absolute confidence. Back within the keep, Ronan notices the change immediately, his suspicions sharpening into something closer to alarm, as he watches Alira and Kale interact with an ease that did not exist before their journey to the farmlands. He corners her one evening near the library, his voice low and direct, asking bluntly what she truly wants from the king, and whether her intentions are as harmless as she pretends. Alira meets his questions with practiced calm, insisting she wants nothing beyond safety, and a quiet life within walls that have, despite everything, begun to feel less like a prison, and more like something else entirely. Ronan does not appear convinced, though he lets the matter drop for the moment, his eyes promising that he will continue watching her every move, with unwavering attention. That night, Alira writes a brief coded message intended for Doran, her contact within the Ashvale resistance, updating him on her progress within the keep, while carefully omitting the growing complications forming inside her own heart. She hides the note within a hollow stone near the garden wall, the agreed signal for retrieval, and returns to her chamber feeling more divided than she has felt since the night the fire took everything she once knew as home. She stands at her window for a long while, watching the quiet courtyard below, and allows herself, just once, to wonder what her life might have looked like if circumstances had been different, if the man sleeping somewhere within these walls had never been connected to the tragedy that shaped her entire existence. The thought passes quickly, pushed aside by years of discipline and purpose, yet it leaves behind a quiet ache she cannot fully ignore, no matter how firmly she tries to bury it beneath the weight of her mission. Weeks settle into a strange new rhythm within the keep, and Alira finds herself pulled deeper into a life she never planned to live for longer than necessary. Kale begins seeking her out with increasing frequency, no longer waiting for formal meals or planned excursions to speak with her. He finds her in the library, in the gardens, even once in the quiet corridor outside her own chamber, always with some small reason for the visit that neither of them fully believes. Their conversations grow longer, wandering from matters of the kingdom into subjects far more personal, favorite books, childhood memories carefully edited for safety, opinions on subjects neither expected the other to care about. Alira notices, with growing unease, that she no longer has to force herself to engage fully in these exchanges. The effort of maintaining her mask grows lighter each day, not because her purpose has changed, but because pretending to enjoy his company has become dangerously close to the truth. One afternoon, she finds herself in the training yard again, watching soldiers practice as she often does, when Kale approaches without his usual guards trailing behind him. He asks, almost playfully, whether her earlier claim of knowing nothing about combat was entirely honest, having noticed the sharp, analytical way she studies every movement the soldiers make. Elira hesitates, caught between her careful cover story and an unexpected flicker of pride in skills she rarely has reason to display. She admits, cautiously, that she learned some basic defense in her youth, though she keeps the details vague, unwilling to reveal the true extent of years spent training for exactly this kind of infiltration. Kale's eyes light with genuine interest, and before she can protest, he suggests a friendly sparring match, promising to go easy given her supposed inexperience. Something reckless stirs within her, a temptation to finally use the skills she has been forced to hide since arriving at the keep, and against every instinct of caution, she agrees. They move to a quiet corner of the training yard, away from curious eyes, and Kale hands her a wooden practice blade, adopting a relaxed stance that suggests he still believes this will be an easy, one-sided exercise. Elira allows him to believe it for exactly one exchange, deflecting his first strike with deliberate clumsiness, before her training takes over entirely on the second. She moves faster than he expects, her strikes precise and controlled, forcing him to abandon his relaxed posture almost immediately. Surprise flashes across his face, quickly replaced by genuine delight as he matches her intensity, and for several long minutes, the practice match becomes something closer to an equal contest than either of them anticipated. When she finally disarms him with a clean, practiced motion, sending his wooden blade clattering across the stone ground, the training yard falls silent for a heartbeat, before Kale bursts into surprised laughter, the sound warm and unguarded, in a way she has never heard from him before. He asks, still smiling, exactly who taught a supposedly simple village girl to fight like that, and Elira realizes too late that she has revealed far more than she intended. She offers a hurried explanation about a protective older relative, watching carefully to see if he believes her, relieved when his expression shows only continued amusement rather than suspicion. Yet as they walk back toward the main hall together, she feels the weight of her own carelessness settling heavily in her chest, a reminder that every moment spent enjoying his company brings new risks she cannot afford to ignore. That evening, alone in her chamber, something shifts within her that she cannot fully explain. As she sits by her window, replaying the sparring match in her mind, she becomes aware of a strange warmth settling beneath her skin, a pull she has never experienced before, faint but unmistakable, drawing her attention toward the wing of the keep where Kale's chambers are located. She dismisses the sensation as simple exhaustion at first, though it lingers stubbornly through the following days, growing slightly stronger each time she finds herself near him. She has heard whispers among the household staff about mate bonds, ancient connections between certain lichens and their destined partners, though she never believed such things applied to someone like herself, born without the blood that carries such gifts. Yet the pull remains, undeniable, and increasingly difficult to ignore, and when she finally gathers the courage to ask Marin carefully worded questions about the phenomenon, the older woman's knowing glance tells her more than any direct answer could. Marin explains, gently but plainly, that such bonds occasionally form between lichens and humans both, rare but not unheard of, and that the sensation Elira describes matches every early sign of a connection beginning to take hold. The revelation leaves Elira shaken in ways she struggles to process. A bond with Kale Draven would mean something far beyond simple attraction or reluctant respect. It would mean a connection recognized by his very nature as a lichen, one that grows stronger with time and proximity, one that history suggests becomes nearly impossible to fully resist once fully formed. She spends that night pacing her small chamber, torn between the mission that brought her to these walls and a growing fear that something far beyond her control has already begun reshaping everything she believed about her purpose here. Ashvale still burns in her memory, her family's loss still demands justice, and yet the pull toward the very man responsible grows stronger with each passing day, threatening to unravel years of careful preparation and unwavering resolve. By morning, she forces herself back into familiar discipline, reminding herself firmly that whatever strange connection exists between them changes nothing about the truth of his crimes. A bond, however powerful, cannot erase the fire that took everything she once loved, and she vows silently, staring at her own reflection in the small chamber mirror, that she will not allow it to weaken her resolve, no matter how difficult that promise becomes to keep in the days ahead. Despite her private vow, the following days prove far harder than she anticipated. The pull toward Chaol does not fade with resistance, but instead grows sharper whenever she deliberately avoids him, until even simple tasks like walking through the gardens become exercises in quiet, exhausting willpower. She begins taking longer routes through the keep, specifically to avoid crossing paths with him, though her efforts rarely succeed for more than a day or two at a time. Chaol, for his part, seems entirely unaware of the internal battle raging within her, though Elira notices subtle changes in his own behavior that suggest he feels something similar, even if he lacks the full understanding of what it means. He finds excuses to linger near her during shared meals, his attention drifting toward her even during conversations with his advisors, and once, during a formal council meeting she was permitted to observe, she catches him glancing toward the door, as though sensing her arrival, before she has even entered the room. Ronan notices these changes as well, and his suspicion transforms into something closer to genuine alarm. He begins making excuses to interrupt their private conversations, positioning himself nearby whenever Chaol seeks her out, his presence a constant, watchful shadow that Elira learns to navigate with practiced patience. She understands his concern, even respects it in a strange way, recognizing in him the same protective instinct that once drove her own family to shield her from danger, though his loyalty belongs to a king she was trained to see as an enemy. One evening, during a quiet dinner, shared only between the three of them, Ronan finally voices his concerns directly, though carefully worded enough to avoid outright accusation. He asks Chaol, in Elira's presence, whether it is truly wise to allow someone with no verified history such close access to matters of the household, reminding him gently that a king's trust should never be given carelessly, regardless of personal feelings that might complicate his judgment. Chaol's expression hardens slightly, though his voice remains calm, as he reminds Ronan that questions of trust remain his own to weigh, not matters for his second-in-command to decide on his behalf. The tension between the two men lingers uncomfortably through the remainder of the meal, and Elira sits quietly through the exchange, aware that her presence has become a source of genuine conflict within a household that once functioned with far greater unity. Later, walking alone through a quiet corridor after the tense dinner concludes, Elira finds herself unexpectedly confronted by Ronan, who has clearly been waiting for a private moment to speak with her directly. His voice carries none of the diplomatic restraint he showed during dinner, his words sharp and pointed as he tells her plainly that he does not trust her, that something about her arrival and her sudden closeness to the king feels deliberately calculated rather than coincidental. Elira meets his accusations with careful calm, insisting she wants nothing more than safety and stability, though she can see clearly that her words do little to ease his suspicion. Before she can offer further reassurance, Ronan leans closer, his voice dropping to something quieter but far more dangerous, warning her that he intends to uncover the truth about her past, no matter how carefully she has hidden it, and that when he does, she will answer for whatever secrets she carries. The warning lingers with her, long after Ronan disappears down the corridor, a cold reminder that her time within these walls grows more precarious with each passing day. She returns to her chamber that night with renewed urgency, understanding clearly that she must either complete her mission soon or risk exposure before she ever gets the chance to finish what she came here to do. Yet even as she reminds herself of the growing danger, the persistent pull toward Chaol refuses to quiet, growing instead into something she can no longer dismiss as simple imagination or exhaustion. She lies awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her small chamber, caught between the mission that defines her entire purpose and a connection she never asked for, never wanted, and cannot seem to escape no matter how firmly she tries. Doran arrives at the edge of the keep's territory 3 nights later, disguised as a traveling merchant, using the signal Elira left hidden within the garden wall to arrange a brief, dangerous meeting beyond the outer patrol routes. She slips away under cover of darkness, her heart pounding with a mixture of relief and dread, as she finally faces someone from the life she left behind to complete this mission. Doran looks older than she remembers, weariness carved into every line of his face, though his eyes remain sharp with the same fierce determination that guided the Ashvale resistance since the night their village burned. He listens carefully as she reports her progress, her access to the keep, the trust she has slowly built with the king himself, though she carefully omits any mention of the strange, growing bond threatening to complicate everything she has worked toward. He praises her progress cautiously, reminding her that patience remains essential, that rushing the mission risks failure and exposure in equal measure. Yet as their conversation continues, Elira senses an unspoken urgency beneath his careful words, a pressure she cannot quite name but feels clearly nonetheless. Before they part, Doran asks directly whether anything has changed in her resolve, whether the comfort of keep life has softened the purpose that brought her here in the first place. Elira answers firmly, perhaps too firmly, insisting that nothing has changed, that she remains fully committed to finishing what Ashvale demands of her. Doran studies her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the darkness, before finally nodding and disappearing back into the night, leaving Elira alone, with a growing uncertainty she cannot fully silence, no matter how convincingly she insists otherwise, even to herself. The days following her meeting with Doran pass in a haze of conflicting emotions, each hour within the keep pulling Elira further from the certainty she once carried so easily. The bond continues strengthening, despite every effort to suppress it, until even brief proximity to Kale sends warmth spreading through her chest, unmistakable and impossible to ignore, no matter how firmly she tries. Kale, too, seems increasingly aware that something significant has shifted between them, though he still lacks full understanding of what exactly connects them so strongly. During a quiet evening in the library, surrounded by shelves of ancient texts neither of them are truly reading, he finally voices the question that has clearly been building within him for days, asking gently whether she feels it too, this strange, persistent pull whenever they share the same room. Elira hesitates, torn between honesty and the careful deception she has maintained since arriving at the keep. Something in his expression, open and vulnerable, in a way she rarely sees from a man who carries the weight of an entire kingdom, breaks through her usual caution, and she admits quietly that yes, she feels it too, though she does not yet fully understand what it means. Kale explains, with careful, measured words, what little he knows about mate bonds among his people, ancient connections recognized by instinct rather than choice, said to grow stronger with time, until resistance becomes nearly impossible. He tells her plainly that he has never expected to feel such a connection, especially not with someone whose past remains largely a mystery to him, yet he cannot deny what his own instincts clearly recognize. The confession hangs heavily between them, neither quite willing to acknowledge fully what it might mean for two people from such different worlds, bound by circumstances neither chose, and complicated further by secrets only one of them fully understands. Elira excuses herself shortly after, her mind spinning with implications she cannot process, retreating to her chamber with the bond's warmth still lingering uncomfortably beneath her skin. That night, she writes another coded message for Doran, though this time she struggles to find the right words, eventually settling on a brief, vague update that omits any mention of the bond entirely. She hides the note within its usual location, though guilt settles heavily in her chest as she walks away, aware that keeping such crucial information from her handlers grows more dangerous with each passing day. The following morning, Doran's response arrives sooner than expected, delivered through a servant Elira does not recognize, someone clearly connected to the resistance network operating quietly within the keep's surrounding territory. The message is short and direct, reminding her firmly that the mission remains unchanged regardless of any personal complications, and that further delay will not be tolerated much longer. The warning settles uneasily in her stomach, a reminder that patience among her handlers has limits, and that whatever growing connection exists between herself and Kale changes nothing about the expectations placed upon her since the night she agreed to this mission years ago. She spends the following days torn between two irreconcilable truths, the loyalty she owes her lost family, and the undeniable pull toward a man she was sent to destroy. During a quiet afternoon walk through the gardens, Kale finds her again, his presence immediately soothing the restless anxiety that has followed her since Doran's warning arrived. They walk together in comfortable silence for a while, before he finally speaks, admitting hesitantly that he has begun considering what a future might look like, one where the bond between them grows into something acknowledged openly, rather than quietly ignored. Elira's chest tightens painfully at his words, torn between the warmth his honesty stirs within her, and the crushing weight of everything she still hides from him. She offers a careful, non-committal response, unable to fully embrace a future she knows may never exist once the truth of her mission comes to light, yet equally unable to reject the growing feelings she can no longer convincingly deny, even to herself. That evening, watching the sunset paint the keep's stone walls in shades of gold and crimson, Illyra allows herself a rare moment of quiet honesty. Whatever began as a calculated mission has grown into something far more complicated than she ever anticipated, and the path forward, once so clearly defined by vengeance and purpose, now stretches ahead, uncertain and dangerous, in ways she never prepared herself to face. Ronan's suspicion, meanwhile, reaches a breaking point he can no longer keep quiet. Unable to accept Cale's dismissal of his concerns, he begins conducting his own quiet investigation into Illyra's background, sending trusted soldiers to question travelers and merchants who might recall a girl matching her description from before her arrival at the auction block. His methods are careful, deliberate, designed to avoid drawing attention from Cale or anyone else within the household who might interfere with his search for the truth. Within days, fragments of information begin reaching him, small details that individually mean little, but together begin forming a troubling pattern. A merchant recalls a young woman traveling with a group rumored to have connections to resistance movements operating along the northern borders. A soldier stationed near the old Ashvale territory mentions vague memories of refugee children scattered after the massacre years ago, though none of the details prove conclusive enough for immediate action. Ronan keeps these fragments to himself for now, unwilling to bring unproven suspicions before Cale without stronger evidence, though the pieces he has gathered only deepen his conviction that Illyra's arrival within the keep was never simple chance. He watches her more closely than ever, studying her interactions with Cale, searching for any slip in her careful composure that might confirm his growing fears. Illyra senses his increased attention, though she cannot yet determine exactly how much he has uncovered. She grows more careful in her own movements, more deliberate in her conversations, aware that any misstep now could unravel months of patient work before she ever completes what she came here to do. Yet even as caution guides her actions, the bond with Cale continues deepening in ways she struggles to control, drawing her toward him even when every instinct warns her to maintain careful distance. One evening, during a rare quiet moment shared alone in his private study, Cale reaches for her hand, almost without thinking, his fingers warm and steady against her own. The contact sends a jolt of warmth through her entire body, stronger than anything she has felt before, and for a brief, unguarded moment, she allows herself to simply exist within the connection, without questioning its danger or its consequences. Cale studies her expression carefully, something vulnerable flickering behind his usually guarded eyes, and he admits quietly that he has never allowed himself to feel this way about anyone, that the weight of his crown has always demanded distance from personal attachment, yet somehow, she has broken through defenses he believed permanent. Illyra's heart aches at his honesty, torn between the truth she cannot yet share and the growing certainty that whatever exists between them has become far too significant to dismiss as mere complication. She returns to her chamber that night carrying the weight of an impossible choice pressing heavily against her conscience. The mission that once felt like her only purpose now competes directly against feelings she never anticipated, feelings that grow stronger with each passing day, despite every effort to suppress them. Somewhere beyond the keep's walls, her family's memory demands justice, while within these very walls, a bond neither chosen nor easily ignored continues pulling her toward the very man she was sent to destroy. She sits by her window long into the night, staring at the stars scattered across the dark sky, searching for answers that refuse to reveal themselves clearly. Whatever path she chooses in the days ahead, she understands now that the simple, clear purpose she carried into this fortress has become something far more complicated, tangled between loyalty to the dead and an undeniable connection to the living that she can no longer pretend does not exist. Ronan's investigation finally yields the evidence he has been searching for, when one of his soldiers returns from the northern border territories with a name that changes everything. A traitor recalls, with growing certainty under careful questioning, a young girl named Illyra, traveling years ago, with a group later confirmed to be operating under Doran's leadership, a name Ronan has encountered before, in reports concerning resistance activity linked to the old Ashvale massacre. He brings this information directly to Cale, laying out the fragments he has gathered with careful, methodical precision, watching his king's expression shift from disbelief to something far more troubled as the pieces begin forming a picture neither of them wants to accept. Cale listens in silence, his jaw tight, his hands clenched against the edge of his desk, though he ultimately insists that fragments and rumors do not constitute proof, that Alira deserves the chance to explain herself before any judgment is made. Ronan argues fiercely against such caution, reminding Cale that the safety of the entire keep may depend on acting swiftly rather than allowing personal feelings to delay necessary action. The argument between them grows heated, years of trust and loyalty straining under the weight of a suspicion neither man fully wants to confront, until Cale finally dismisses Ronan with a firm command to gather more concrete evidence before bringing the matter forward again. Unsatisfied but unwilling to openly defy his king, Ronan intensifies his investigation instead, extending his search into the keep itself, questioning servants and staff members who might have noticed anything unusual about Alira's behavior since her arrival. His inquiries eventually reach a young servant named Petra, who mentions, innocently and without understanding the implications, having once seen Alira slip away from her chamber late at night, moving toward the garden wall with unusual purpose. Ronan presses Petra for further details, and though the servant knows little beyond what she witnessed, her account provides exactly the confirmation he needs to bring his suspicions directly before Cale once more. Alira, unaware that her carefully hidden meetings have been discovered, continues her careful balance between mission and growing affection, oblivious to the danger now closing in around her from multiple directions at once. Sensing Ronan's suspicion growing more dangerous with each passing day, Alira makes a desperate, reckless decision one evening, choosing to plant a small piece of misleading evidence within Petra's quarters, hoping to redirect blame away from herself and towards someone whose connection to the resistance can be more easily dismissed as coincidence. The choice weighs heavily on her conscience, even as she makes it, though desperation and fear for her mission's survival override the guilt threatening to stop her. The plan works more effectively than she anticipated, and within days, Petra finds herself under suspicion for connections she does not actually possess, facing harsh questioning from Ronan's soldiers, despite her genuine confusion and fear. Alira watches from a careful distance as the innocent servant's life unravels because of her own desperate choice, and the weight of that guilt settles permanently into her chest, a burden she knows she will carry, regardless of how her mission ultimately concludes. Cale, troubled by the harsh treatment of a servant he has always considered loyal and harmless, intervenes personally, questioning Petra himself with far gentler methods than Ronan employed. Something in the young woman's genuine confusion and fear convinces him quickly that she poses no real threat, and he orders her released from custody, though the incident leaves him more unsettled than he admits openly, a nagging doubt beginning to form about whether the true source of suspicion might lie elsewhere entirely. Alira, witnessing the aftermath of her own manipulation, finds herself unable to fully celebrate the successful deflection of Ronan's suspicion. Petra's tearful relief upon her release, combined with the visible trauma the harsh questioning left behind, forces Alira to confront uncomfortable truths about the cost of her mission that extend far beyond the man she was originally sent to destroy. Innocent people now suffer because of choices she makes to protect a purpose that once felt entirely justified. That night, unable to sleep, Alira finds herself wandering the quiet corridors of the keep, eventually arriving at Petra's small chamber near the servants' quarters. She knocks softly, and when the young woman answers, still visibly shaken from the day's events, Alira offers a quiet, genuine apology, disguised as simple concern for her well-being, unable to reveal the true source of her guilt, but desperate to offer some small comfort regardless. Petra, grateful for the unexpected kindness, thanks her warmly, entirely unaware of the role Alira played in her recent ordeal, and the gratitude only deepens Alira's private shame as she returns to her own chamber that night. She sits by her window once more, staring out at the same courtyard she has watched countless times since her arrival, though the view feels different now, heavier somehow, weighted by consequences she never fully anticipated when she agreed to this mission years ago. Ronan, meanwhile, remains unconvinced by the resolution of Petra's questioning, his instincts telling him clearly that something remains unresolved despite the servant's apparent innocence. He returns to his private investigation with renewed determination, unwilling to abandon suspicions that continue to feel increasingly justified, despite Cale's reluctance to act on incomplete evidence. He begins watching Alira, even more closely than before, waiting patiently for the moment she inevitably makes a mistake, significant enough to confirm what he already believes to be true. The tension within the keep grows increasingly difficult to ignore, whispers spreading among the household staff about hidden secrets and growing distrust, though most remain unaware of the true stakes hidden beneath the surface of daily keep life. Elira feels the walls closing in around her more, with each passing day, aware that her time to complete her mission, or to somehow escape it entirely, grows shorter with every hour that Ronan continues his relentless search for proof. Determined to find undeniable proof before approaching Kale again, Ronan begins tracing the movements of unfamiliar travelers who have passed near the keep's outer territories in recent weeks, eventually uncovering reports of a merchant matching Doran's description spotted twice within riding distance of the fortress. He assigns 2 trusted soldiers to watch the surrounding roads discreetly, hoping to catch any further contact between Elira and whoever continues supplying her with instructions from beyond the keep's walls. Elira, sensing the increased activity along the borders through careful observation of returning patrols, grows more cautious in her communications, extending the time between messages and choosing increasingly indirect methods to avoid detection. She begins to suspect, correctly, that Ronan's search has narrowed considerably, and the growing danger forces her to consider options she never previously entertained, including the possibility of abandoning her mission entirely before it costs her everything she has built within these walls. During a private conversation with Kale one evening, she finds herself dangerously close to confessing everything, the words rising unbidden as she watches him speak passionately about his hopes for lasting peace between the kingdom's scattered territories. Something in his sincerity, his genuine desire to correct the mistakes of his father's reign, makes the weight of her secret nearly unbearable, though years of discipline ultimately hold her tongue in check, the confession dying unspoken on her lips once again. Kale notices her uncharacteristic silence and gently asks what troubles her, his concern genuine and immediate, and Elira offers a vague explanation about exhaustion and homesickness, deflecting his worry, while internally battling the growing certainty that her carefully constructed life within the keep cannot continue indefinitely, without eventually collapsing entirely under the weight of everything she continues to hide. That night, she drafts a message to Doran, unlike any she has sent before, questioning for the first time whether the mission should continue at all, citing the growing danger of exposure, and, though she does not admit it directly even to herself, the undeniable complications created by her deepening bond with the very man she was sent to destroy. She hesitates for a long while, before finally hiding the note within its usual location, uncertain whether she truly wants an answer, or simply needs to voice doubts she can no longer silence internally. The following days pass in tense uncertainty, Elira watching for any sign of Doran's response, while simultaneously navigating Ronan's increasingly obvious surveillance and Kale's persistent unknowing affection. The careful balance she has maintained for weeks begins showing visible cracks, each day requiring more effort to sustain than the last, until even simple tasks like sharing a meal with the household feel like walking across increasingly thin ice above a freezing lake. When Doran's response finally arrives, delivered through the same servant network as before, the message proves shorter and colder than anything she has received previously, reminding her sharply that doubt has no place within their cause, and that the resistance has sacrificed too much already to abandon their mission now, over complications that should never have been allowed to develop in the first place. The harsh tone leaves Elira feeling more isolated than ever, caught between 2 worlds that both now demand loyalty she struggles increasingly to give fully to either side. A rare quiet evening finds Elira and Kale alone in his private study, the fire crackling softly against the chill of an early autumn night, and something in the peaceful stillness seems to loosen words Kale has clearly carried unspoken for years. He begins speaking, without prompting, about his father's reign, about decisions made during a war fought long before Kale held any real power to influence the choices being made in his name. Elira listens with careful stillness, her heart pounding, as she realizes he is finally approaching the subject she has waited years to hear him address directly. He tells her, his voice low and heavy with old guilt, about a campaign along the northern borders meant to secure territory from resistance groups his father's council believed threatened the kingdom's stability, a campaign that resulted in the destruction of several villages, including one whose name he speaks with visible difficulty. Ashvale. The word lands like a physical blow, and Alira forces herself to remain perfectly still, her expression carefully neutral despite the storm of emotion suddenly raging within her. Kale continues, unaware of the significance his confession holds for the woman sitting across from him, explaining that he was barely more than a boy when the order was given, too young and too powerless within his father's court to stop a decision made entirely without his knowledge until the fires had already been set. He describes the guilt that has haunted him every day since discovering the full truth of what happened, years after the massacre itself, when he finally gained enough authority to review the council's old records and understand exactly what his father's advisors had authorized in his name. He tells her about quiet efforts made since then to locate survivors, to offer what reparations he could, without drawing public attention to failures that might destabilize a kingdom already fragile from years of conflict. Alira's mind races, memories of that terrible night flooding back with vivid, painful clarity. The smoke, the screaming, the desperate flight through burning streets that ended with her being the only member of her immediate family to survive. Everything she believed about the man sitting before her, every carefully constructed justification for the mission she was sent to complete, suddenly feels far less certain than it did only moments ago. She asks, her voice carefully controlled despite the turmoil beneath the surface, whether he ever discovered what became of the survivors, whether any attempt was made to find and help those who managed to escape the flames that night. Kale's expression grows even heavier, as he admits that his search efforts have found frustratingly little, most survivors having scattered and disappeared entirely, their trail growing cold long before he gained the authority and resources to properly investigate. The irony of the moment settles over Alira like a physical weight, sitting mere feet away from the very survivor he claims to have searched for, unable to reveal her identity without unraveling everything she has built within these walls, and likely ending whatever fragile trust and affection has grown between them. She excuses herself shortly after, claiming exhaustion, though the real reason for her sudden departure has nothing to do with tiredness, and everything to do with the overwhelming need to process what she has just learned. Alone in her chamber, Alira paces restlessly for hours, her entire understanding of her mission thrown into complete disarray. The monster she was trained to hate, the tyrant responsible for burning her home and destroying her family, does not match the guilt-ridden, genuinely remorseful man who just confessed his ongoing efforts to make amends for crimes committed before he held any real power to prevent them. She thinks of Doran's harsh message, of the Resistance's unwavering demand for justice regardless of complicating circumstances, and wonders for the first time whether justice, as her handlers define it, truly aligns with the actual truth of what happened at Ashvale. Kale did not order the massacre. He was a powerless boy, trapped within a court, controlled by advisors who acted without his knowledge or consent, left to inherit the guilt and consequences of choices he never made. Yet even as sympathy and understanding grow within her, Alira cannot fully release the anger that has defined her purpose for years. Whatever Kale's personal guilt, whatever genuine remorse he carries, the fact remains that Ashvale burned, her family died, and the kingdom he now rules bears responsibility for that destruction, regardless of who specifically issued the original command. She spends that night wrestling with contradictions that refuse to resolve themselves neatly, torn between newfound understanding and years of carefully cultivated purpose, uncertain for the first time since accepting this mission exactly what completing it would actually accomplish, or whether vengeance against a man now working quietly to correct his father's mistakes truly serves the justice her lost family deserves. Morning brings no clarity, only exhaustion, and a heavier heart than she carried the night before. She avoids Kale for most of the day, claiming a headache to Marin when questioned about her absence from the midday meal, unable to face him directly, while her thoughts remain so thoroughly unresolved. He sends a brief note asking after her well-being, gentle and concerned, and the simple kindness of it only deepens the ache growing steadily within her chest. By evening, she forces herself back into the household's normal rhythm, aware that continued absence will only draw unwanted attention from Ronan, whose suspicion already threatens to expose everything she has worked to protect. She finds Kale in the main hall, and his relief at seeing her again is immediate and genuine, unguarded in a way that makes her guilt over everything she still hides feel almost unbearable. They speak briefly, carefully avoiding the heavy subject of the previous evening's confession, though the unspoken weight of it lingers between them regardless. Alira watches him more closely than before, searching for any trace of the monster she once believed him to be, and finding instead only a man burdened by inherited guilt. working quietly to build something better than what his father left behind. That night, alone once more, she finally allows herself to consider a possibility she has avoided since arriving at the keep. Perhaps completing her mission as originally planned would not honor her family's memory, but instead simply add another tragedy to a chain of violence that Cale himself seems genuinely committed to ending. The thought terrifies her, threatening everything she has believed about her purpose for years, yet it refuses to fully leave her mind no matter how firmly she tries to push it away. The fragile peace Alira has built within her own conflicted heart shatters completely when Doran arrives unannounced at the edge of the keep's territory, disguised once again as a traveling merchant, demanding an immediate meeting through an urgent signal left at the garden wall. She slips away that night with a growing sense of dread, aware that such an unscheduled visit likely means the Resistance's patience has finally run out entirely. She finds him waiting in the same shadowed clearing as before, though his expression carries none of the cautious warmth from their previous meetings. He tells her directly, without any softening of the harsh truth, that the Resistance Council has grown tired of delays, that her continued hesitation has been noticed and questioned by leaders who no longer trust that she remains fully committed to the mission she swore to complete years ago. Alira tries to explain the complexity of the situation within the keep, the trust she has built, the potential value of information she continues gathering, but Doran cuts her explanation short, with a coldness she has never witnessed from him before. He tells her plainly that the council has set a deadline, 3 days from tonight, during which she must complete her original mission or face consequences that extend beyond her own safety alone. Her blood runs cold as he reveals the true nature of those consequences, informing her that her younger brother, Finn, long believed dead in the chaos following Ashvale's destruction, has actually survived all these years, hidden and protected by the Resistance as insurance against exactly this kind of hesitation. He describes, with clinical detachment that makes the threat feel even more real, that Finn's continued safety depends entirely on Alira finishing what she was sent to do within the given time frame. The revelation nearly buckles her knees, joy and horror crashing together violently within her chest. Her brother, the small boy she watched disappear into chaos and smoke the night their village burned, alive after all these years, yet held as leverage by the very people she has trusted completely, since losing everything else that mattered to her. She demands to see proof, to know that Finn truly lives, and Doran produces a small, worn item, a carved wooden bird that belonged to their mother, something only someone with direct access to her family's belongings could possibly possess. Overwhelmed by conflicting emotions too powerful to fully process in the moment, Alira agrees to the deadline, though her voice sounds distant and hollow even to her own ears as she makes the promise. Doran nods, satisfied, and disappears back into the darkness, leaving her alone in the clearing, with a choice that now threatens to destroy either the brother she believed lost forever, or the man who has somehow, against every expectation, become impossible to fully hate. She returns to the keep in a daze, moving through familiar corridors without truly seeing them, her mind consumed entirely by the impossible decision now facing her. 3 days to choose between the only family she has left, and a bond she never asked for but can no longer deny, exists within her heart, regardless of how thoroughly it complicates everything she once believed about justice and vengeance. The following morning, Cale notices her distraction immediately, his concern deepening when she fails to offer any convincing explanation for her obvious distress. He asks gently what troubles her so deeply, and for one desperate moment, Alira considers telling him everything: the mission, her true identity, Ashvale, Finn, the impossible choice now hanging over her like an executioner's blade. The words rise to her lips, trembling and uncertain, before fear and years of careful discipline force them back down once again. She offers instead a vague explanation about difficult news from her past, catching up with her. Technically true, though far from the complete honesty he deserves. Cale accepts her explanation with visible reluctance, clearly sensing there is more beneath the surface, though he does not press further, respecting whatever boundaries she still maintains despite the growing intimacy between them. That night, Alira sits alone in her chamber long after the keep falls silent, staring at the small dagger she has kept hidden since her arrival, the very weapon meant to fulfill her original mission when the right moment finally arrived. She turns it over slowly in her hands, weighing its familiar weight against the impossible choice now facing her, torn between the brother she thought she had already lost, and the man whose death would apparently secure his safety. Somewhere beyond these walls, her brother waits, unaware of the terrible bargain being negotiated on his behalf, while within these very walls, Cale sleeps peacefully, equally unaware that the woman he has come to trust and care for holds his life balanced precariously against her own family's survival. Alira closes her eyes, exhaustion and grief finally overwhelming her, though sleep offers little relief from a decision that grows more impossible with every passing hour. The following day passes in agonizing slowness, each hour weighing on Alira like a physical burden she cannot set down. She moves through her usual routines within the keep, careful to maintain appearances despite the turmoil raging beneath her calm exterior, though Ronan's watchful eyes seem to track her every movement with renewed intensity, as though he senses something significant has shifted since her disappearance the previous night. During a quiet moment in the garden, she finds herself unexpectedly approached by Corwin, the young soldier who has remained one of the few genuinely uncomplicated relationships she has formed within these walls. He mentions, with innocent concern, that she seems troubled lately, offering simple friendship without any of the calculated agendas that color nearly every other interaction she navigates daily. His kindness, so straightforward and undemanding, nearly breaks through her careful composure entirely, though she manages a grateful smile and a vague reassurance before excusing herself once again. That evening, Cale requests her presence for a private dinner, and though every instinct urges her to decline, to create distance before the impossible choice she must make within days, she finds herself unable to refuse him. They share a quiet meal together, and despite the storm raging within her, she allows herself this one evening to simply exist within his presence, to memorize the warmth of his laughter and the gentle way he speaks with her, uncertain whether such moments will be possible much longer, regardless of which impossible choice she ultimately makes. As the evening draws to a close, Cale reaches for her hand across the table, his expression softer and more open than she has ever seen it, and he tells her quietly that whatever burden she carries, whatever secrets still remain unspoken between them, he hopes she knows that his feelings for her remain unchanged and unwavering. The words land like both comfort and torment, deepening her guilt even as they strengthen the growing certainty that she cannot bring herself to end his life, regardless of what such refusal might cost her. With only 2 days remaining before Doran's deadline, Alira makes a decision that terrifies her more than any mission she has ever undertaken. She resolves to find a way to save both her brother and Cale, refusing to accept that the impossible choice presented to her truly represents the only possible outcome available. The plan forming in her mind is dangerous, uncertain, and requires trusting people she has spent months carefully deceiving. Yet she can see no other path forward that does not end in devastating loss, regardless of her final choice. She begins by seeking out Corwin, the one person within the keep whose loyalty feels uncomplicated by politics or suspicion. She approaches him carefully, testing his trustworthiness with vague questions about his willingness to help someone in genuine trouble, and his immediate, earnest offer of assistance without demanding full explanation gives her the courage to reveal slightly more than she intended, though still far less than the complete truth. Meanwhile, Ronan's investigation reaches its final, damning conclusion when his soldiers finally intercept a coded message hidden within the garden wall, one Alira left before fully committing to her new plan, its contents specific enough to remove any remaining doubt about her true purpose within the keep. He brings this final piece of evidence directly to Cale, no longer willing to wait for permission or further confirmation, understanding that the danger has grown too immediate to delay action any longer. Cale reads the intercepted message in stunned silence, his expression shifting through disbelief, betrayal, and finally a grief so profound that Ronan finds himself unable to fully celebrate the vindication of his long-standing suspicions. The king sits motionless for a long while, the evidence of Alira's true purpose spread before him, everything he believed about their growing connection suddenly thrown into devastating question. He orders Ronan to say nothing yet, to allow him time to process the revelation, before deciding how best to handle a situation that threatens not only his own safety, but the stability of an entire kingdom, built on the fragile trust he has worked years to establish. Ronan reluctantly agrees, though his instincts scream against further delay, understanding nonetheless the weight of what his king now carries. Unaware that her secret has finally been discovered, Elira continues preparing her desperate plan, meeting quietly with Corwin to arrange a means of getting word to her brother's location, hoping against hope that she can somehow convince Doran and the Resistance Council to accept an alternative resolution that spares Cale's life while still securing Finn's safety. She knows the odds remain slim, that the Resistance has shown little patience for compromise, yet she refuses to abandon hope entirely while any possibility remains. That night, as she moves quietly through the keep's corridors on her way to a final planning meeting with Corwin, she encounters Cale unexpectedly in a dimly lit hallway, his expression carefully controlled in a way that immediately raises alarm within her carefully guarded instincts. Something in his eyes, a distance and pain she has never seen there before, tells her clearly that whatever careful balance she has maintained has finally, catastrophically collapsed. He asks her, quietly and without preamble, whether everything between them has been a lie from the very beginning, and Elira's breath catches painfully in her throat as she realizes with sickening clarity that her secret has somehow been discovered. She opens her mouth to explain, to offer the complicated truth that has grown far beyond simple deception into something she barely understands herself, but the words refuse to come easily, tangled by guilt, fear, and grief all crashing together at once. Before she can find adequate words, Cale turns and walks away, his silence far more devastating than any accusation could have been, leaving her standing alone in the darkened corridor, with her carefully constructed world finally, completely unraveling around her. Elira stands frozen in the empty corridor for several long minutes after Cale's departure, her mind racing through possibilities that all seem to lead toward inevitable disaster. She considers fleeing immediately, abandoning both her mission and any hope of remaining within the keep. Yet the thought of leaving without knowing her brother's fate, or without attempting to explain the full truth to Cale, feels like abandoning everything that still matters to her. She makes her way to Corwin's quarters instead, finding him waiting anxiously as arranged, and quickly explains that circumstances have changed dramatically, that discovery has come sooner than expected, and their timeline for action must accelerate accordingly. Corwin, despite clear apprehension about the danger now surrounding their plan, agrees to help her regardless, his loyalty proving stronger than his fear. Together they finalize a desperate strategy, one that requires Elira to seek out Doran directly before the deadline arrives, hoping to negotiate an alternative resolution before events spiral further beyond her control. Corwin agrees to create a distraction that will allow her to slip beyond the keep's walls undetected, though both of them understand clearly the significant risk such action carries, especially now that her true identity has apparently already been exposed to those who matter most. As she prepares to leave her chamber for what might be the final time, Elira pauses briefly to look around the small space that has become, against every original intention, something resembling a genuine home over these past months. She thinks of Cale's wounded expression in the corridor, of Ronan's long-standing suspicion finally proven correct, of her brother waiting somewhere beyond these walls for a resolution she still cannot guarantee, and steels herself for whatever confirmation awaits in the hours ahead. Corwin's distraction, a staged disagreement among the Eastern Gate guards, draws enough attention for Elira to slip beyond the keep's outer walls under cover of darkness, moving swiftly toward the clearing where she has met Doran twice before. Her heart pounds with every step, aware that time grows desperately short, and that whatever conversation follows will likely determine not only her brother's fate, but the fate of everyone she has come to care about within the fortress behind her. She finds Doran waiting, though his expression shifts to surprise and immediate suspicion when he sees her arrive alone and clearly distressed, rather than reporting the successful completion of her mission. She explains quickly, desperately, that circumstances have changed, that her discovery within the keep has complicated everything, and she pleads for an alternative resolution, offering instead the extensive information she has gathered about the fortress's defenses and Cale's genuine efforts to correct his father's mistakes. Doran's expression hardens as she speaks, and he informs her coldly that the Resistance Council will not accept excuses or alternative arrangements, that her failure to complete the mission as instructed leaves them no choice but to proceed with the consequences already established. He signals to shadows at the clearing's edge, and Elira realizes with horror that additional resistance fighters have been waiting nearby the entire time, prepared to act regardless of how their conversation concluded. Before she can fully process the danger surrounding her, the peaceful night erupts into chaos, as keep guards, alerted by Ronan's careful surveillance of the border territories, converge on the clearing from multiple directions simultaneously. Ronan himself leads the charge, having anticipated exactly this kind of desperate meeting once Alira's absence from the keep was discovered shortly after Kale's confrontation with her in the corridor. The clearing descends into confused, frightening chaos. Resistance fighters and keep soldiers clashing in the darkness, shouts and the clash of weapons filling the night air that only moments before held nothing but tense, quiet negotiation. Alira finds herself caught directly in the middle, desperately trying to prevent the confrontation from escalating into full-scale violence, calling out for both sides to stop, though her voice is quickly lost amid the growing chaos surrounding her. Doran grabs her arm roughly, attempting to pull her away from the fighting, insisting that her only remaining option now is to flee with the resistance before keep forces overwhelm their small group entirely. Alira resists, torn between the family loyalty Doran represents and her desperate need to prevent further bloodshed on both sides, until Kale himself appears at the clearing's edge, having followed Ronan once he learned of the unfolding confrontation. Their eyes meet across the chaotic battlefield, and something passes between them, even amid the danger surrounding both of them. A silent question, and an equally silent, desperate hope for understanding, despite everything that has happened. Alira breaks free from Doran's grip and moves toward Kale instead, ignoring the danger of crossing directly through the chaotic fighting still raging around them. She reaches him just as a resistance fighter moves to strike him from behind, and without hesitation, she places herself between them, deflecting the blow with skill honed through years of careful training, though the effort costs her a painful injury to her shoulder that immediately weakens her grip and balance. Kale catches her before she falls, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning understanding, as he realizes clearly that whatever her original mission might have been, her instinct in this critical moment was to protect him, rather than complete it. The fighting begins to slow as both sides recognize the shifting dynamics unfolding before them, Ronan calling for his soldiers to hold position rather than continuing the assault, while Doran, seeing his plan collapsing entirely, makes one final desperate attempt to reach Alira and pull her away from the man he still views as nothing more than an enemy, deserving destruction. Kale steps forward to intercept him, and the two men face each other directly for the first time. Years of hatred and misunderstanding condensed into a single, tense confrontation. Alira, despite her injury, forces herself upright and moves between them once more, refusing to allow either man to make a choice that cannot be undone. She speaks quickly, desperately, revealing finally and completely everything she has hidden for months: her true identity, her mission, her brother's survival, and the impossible bond that has grown despite every attempt to prevent it. Both men listen, weapons still raised but hesitating, as the full truth finally emerges into the open for everyone present to hear clearly. Doran, hearing her plead for peace rather than the vengeance he has spent years cultivating within her, finally lowers his weapon slightly, though his expression remains conflicted and uncertain. He tells her, with something almost like genuine sorrow beneath his hardened exterior, that he only ever wanted justice for what happened at Ashvale, that watching her grow attached to the very kingdom responsible for that tragedy feels like a betrayal of everyone they lost that terrible night. Kale steps forward then, lowering his own weapon completely, and speaks directly to Doran with a sincerity that surprises everyone present, acknowledging fully the wrongs committed under his father's rule, offering not empty promises but concrete commitment to continued reparations and genuine partnership between the keep and Ashvale's scattered survivors. The offer hangs in the tense night air, uncertain whether it will be accepted or dismissed entirely by a man who has spent years defining himself through opposition to everything Kale represents. After a long, heavy silence, Doran finally signals his remaining fighters to stand down, though his expression makes clear that trust will require far more than a single conversation to fully rebuild. He tells Alira quietly that her brother remains safe, that the threat against Finn's life will not be carried out, given the circumstances now clearly understood, though he warns that the resistance will be watching closely to see whether Kale's promises translate into genuine, lasting action. As the tension finally begins to ease across the clearing, Alira feels the full weight of exhaustion and pain from her injury, finally overwhelming her, and she sways unsteadily on her feet before Kale catches her once again, his arms strong and steady, despite everything that has just transpired between them. She looks up at him, uncertain what she will find in his expression after everything he has just learned, and finds not anger or betrayal, but something far more complicated and far more hopeful than she dared expect. Ronan approaches cautiously as the clearing finally settles into uneasy calm, his own expression conflicted between lingering suspicion and reluctant respect for the choice Alira made in the critical moment that mattered most. He says nothing directly to her, though the subtle nod he offers Chaol suggests a grudging acknowledgement that perhaps his king's instincts about her character held more truth than his own carefully gathered evidence initially suggested. Chaol orders his soldiers to escort the resistance fighters safely back toward their own territory, rather than pursuing punishment or retaliation, a decision that visibly surprises many among his own ranks, though none openly question his judgment given everything that has just unfolded before them. He turns his attention fully to Alira instead, carefully examining her injured shoulder with gentle, careful hands, his earlier anger apparently giving way entirely to concern for her immediate well-being. The journey back to the keep passes mostly in silence, Alira leaning heavily against Chaol for support, as exhaustion and blood loss make walking increasingly difficult. He insists on carrying her the final distance despite her weak protests, and she finds herself too tired and too relieved to argue further, allowing herself finally to simply trust the strength of his arms and the steadiness of his presence, after months of careful deception, now finally, completely laid bare between them. Merrin meets them at the gate with visible alarm, quickly summoning the keep's healer while Chaol carries Alira directly to his own private chambers, rather than her small room in the eastern wing, a decision that speaks volumes about the shift occurring between them, even amid the chaos and uncertainty still surrounding their future. The healer tends to her wound efficiently, assuring both of them that the injury, while painful, will heal completely, with proper rest and care. As the healer finally departs, leaving them alone together, for the first time since the confrontation in the corridor that started this entire desperate chain of events, Chaol sits beside her bed in heavy, thoughtful silence for a long while, before finally speaking. He tells her quietly that he understands now why she never revealed the truth earlier, that the weight of her mission and her family's loss explains far more than it excuses, though he admits the betrayal still stings, despite his growing understanding of everything she has carried alone for so long. Alira listens with tears finally breaking through the careful composure she has maintained for months, offering a complete, unguarded apology for every lie and every careful deception she employed since arriving at the keep. She tells him everything now without reservation, about Ashvale, about her family, about the years of training and preparation that led her to that auction block, and about the moment everything began changing the instant he crossed that crowded banquet hall to defend her from cruelty she had already learned to endure alone. Chaol listens to every word without interruption, and when she finally falls silent, exhausted both physically and emotionally, he reaches for her hand gently, telling her that whatever pain and betrayal he felt discovering the truth cannot outweigh the reality of everything genuine that has grown between them, despite its complicated, difficult beginning. He admits that the bond between them, undeniable and impossible to fully resist, has already made his choice clear, regardless of how their story began. Recovery takes several weeks, during which Alira remains within the keep under careful watch, though the nature of that watch shifts entirely from suspicion into genuine protective concern from nearly everyone within the household, who eventually learns the full, complicated truth of her arrival. Ronan, once her most determined adversary, becomes an unexpected ally, his respect for her courage during the clearing confrontation slowly transforming into cautious friendship as the weeks progress. Chaol sends word to Doran and the Resistance Council, formally inviting representatives to the keep for genuine negotiations regarding lasting reparations and partnership between the two territories, long divided by tragedy and mistrust. The invitation is met initially with skepticism, though Alira's own testimony, combined with Chaol's visible commitment to following through on his promises, gradually begins building the foundation for trust that both sides desperately need after years of conflict and loss. Finn arrives at the keep nearly a month after the confrontation in the clearing, escorted carefully by Doran himself, who remains watchful and reserved despite the improving relations between the Resistance and the keep. The reunion between siblings, separated for years by tragedy neither fully expected to survive, unfolds with overwhelming emotion. tears and disbelief giving way slowly to genuine joy, as Alira finally holds the brother she long believed lost forever. Finn, now a young man rather than the small boy Alira remembers from the night Ashvale burned, adjusts slowly to life within the keep, initially wary of a place so closely tied to his family's tragedy, though Cale's genuine efforts to welcome him, combined with Alira's steady presence, gradually ease his lingering fears. He begins forming friendships among the younger soldiers, including Corwin, whose easy warmth helps bridge the gap between old resentment and new possibility. The formal negotiations between the keep and the resistance stretch across several difficult months, filled with setbacks and moments of renewed tension, though Cale's unwavering commitment to genuine reparation, supported consistently by Alira's unique understanding of both perspectives, eventually produces an agreement neither side believed possible, only a year earlier. Ashvale's remaining survivors receive resources to rebuild, formal acknowledgement of the wrongs committed against them, and a voice within the keep's council, previously denied to territories outside the traditional nobility. As the changes take root across the kingdom, whispers of the king's unconventional choice in companion gradually shift from scandal into something closer to admiration, as Alira's role within the keep evolves from mysterious outsider into genuine partner, her insight and courage proving invaluable as Cale works to reshape a kingdom long defined by his father's mistakes into something more just and more united than it has been in generations. On a quiet evening nearly a year after that fateful night at the auction block, Alira stands once again at the window of what has become her permanent chamber within the keep, though now shared openly with Cale, rather than hidden as a secret complication neither of them anticipated. She watches the same courtyard where guards once patrolled with careless confidence, now home to a fortress, transformed by honesty, reconciliation, and a bond neither of them ever expected, but both have come to cherish completely. Cale joins her at the window, wrapping his arms gently around her from behind, and together they watch the sunset paint the ancient stone walls in warm, golden light, no longer symbols of conquest and tragedy, but of a future being, carefully, deliberately rebuilt from the ashes of a painful past. Alira leans back against him, finally at peace with a journey that began with vengeance and ended, against every original expectation, with genuine, hard-won love. She thinks of her family, of Ashvale, of every sacrifice and every difficult choice that led her to this exact moment, and understands finally that honoring their memory never required destruction, but instead, the harder, more meaningful work of building something better from the wreckage they left behind. The Alpha King, who once acquired her as nothing more than a bargain from a crowded market square, now stands beside her as something far more significant, a partner in rebuilding a kingdom worthy of the peace both of them fought so desperately to find. Outside their window, the keep settles into peaceful evening quiet, no longer haunted by secrets and suspicion, but filled instead with the steady, hopeful rhythm of a household finally united by truth, rather than divided by hidden purpose. Alira closes her eyes, breathing in the warmth of Cale's embrace, and allows herself, fully and without reservation, to simply belong exactly where she stands.